What if I told you that the most important day in all of human history was written down hundreds of years before it happened? Now, I'm not talking about general terms or just like vague predictions, but specific and precise details. This is the claim of scripture that the cross of Jesus Christ was not an accident. So once you see what I'm going to show you in this video, you're going to stop thinking about the cross as just a tragic moment in human history. You're going to see it as something way more intentional, and it's something that you won't be able to unsee. To really do this topic justice, you would need to talk about genre and historical context and how prophecy works. That would take several videos to do. This is just a starting point, but it is a powerful one because we're going to start in a place that you may not expect. Because before Jesus was ever arrested, before Judas ever made a move, the price was already set. Zechariah 11, 12, and 13 says this: "And they weighed out my wages as 30 pieces of silver." 30, not 20, not 50, that exact number, 30 pieces of silver. Now watch this. Matthew says, "Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, 'What will you give me if I deliver him over to you?' And they paid him 30 pieces of silver." So let that sink in for a second. Because not only was the betrayal foretold, but the price of that betrayal was foretold. This was written down centuries before it ever happened. But that's just the beginning, because the next detail is even more shocking. Jesus is standing trial and then something happens. He doesn't defend himself. He doesn't argue. He doesn't fight back against Pontius Pilate or the high priest's false claims against him. But look at Isaiah 53:7. It says, "He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth." False accusations, public humiliation, and Jesus stays silent. The lion, about to face his execution, stays silent. But here's where it gets more interesting, because the next prophecy was written before that method of execution ever existed. Psalm 22:16 says, "For dogs encompass me, a company of evildoers encircles me, they have pierced my hands and feet." That messianic psalm was written by David centuries before crucifixion ever even existed. And yet in John chapter 20, when Jesus appears resurrected before his disciples, what does he show him? His pierced hands. Before Roman soldiers ever used crucifixion, scripture had already described it. But it doesn't stop there, because even the actions of the soldiers at the crucifixion was predicted. Psalm 22:18 reads, "They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." So the soldiers just think that they're gambling, they think that they're mocking him, they're just having a good time, but in reality they're stepping into God's divine plan. Because look at the scene at the cross in the book of John. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his garments and divided them into 4 parts, 1 part for each soldier, also his tunic. But the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see whose it shall be." And if that's not enough for you, look at how the crowd is responding. Because even their words, their actions, their mannerisms were foretold in scripture. Psalm 22:7 and 8 says, "All who see me mock me. They make mouths at me. They wag their heads. He trusts in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, for he delights in him." Now go to the cross. You're going to see the exact same thing happening. Matthew 27 says, "And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, 'You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross.' So also the chief priests with the scribes and elders mocked him, saying, 'He saved others and he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he desires him, for he said, I am the Son of God.'" I hope that you can see this, The same mockery, the same gestures, the same attitude. This is not coincidence. All these things stacked up on top of each other is evidence that what happened at the cross was foretold in the pages of scripture long before it ever happened. But somehow it gets even more detailed. You ready for this? Because even what Jesus drinks, that was also written down. Psalm 69:21 says, "They gave me poison for food, and for my thirst they gave me sour wine to drink." Jump forward with me to John 19 that says, "After this, Jesus, knowing that all was now finished, said, to fulfill the scripture, I thirst. A jar full of sour wine stood there, so they put a sponge full of the sour wine on a hyssop branch and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, 'It is finished.' And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit." Even the thirst he felt on the cross was prophesied. Even the drink that they would offer him was foretold. Nothing is wasted. And then one final detail that ties it all together. This one goes way back to the book of Exodus. And speaking of the Passover lamb, it says, "It shall be eaten in one house. You shall not take any of the flesh outside of the house, and you shall not break any of its bones." Psalm 34 reiterates the prophecy again when it says, "He keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken." Now get ready, because John 19 tells us, "But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs." The other victims, they had their legs broken, but Jesus did not. Why? Because he is the true, perfect Passover lamb, the perfect sacrifice. So now step back with me and look at everything that we've talked about. Betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, silent before his accusers, his hands and feet pierced, his garments divided and lots cast, mocked by the crowd, given sour wine, and not a single bone broken. That is not random. That is not chance. That is not history spiraling out of control. That is design. That is a plan. That is a mission. So the question isn't, were these prophecies fulfilled? They clearly were. The question is, why were they fulfilled? Why would God orchestrate this to begin with? Why plan this out the way that he did? And here's the why. Because at the cross, God was doing exactly what he promised he would do. He is dealing with sin. He is satisfying justice. He is making a way for sinners to be saved. Jesus was not a victim. He was a substitute. He was not dying for his sin, but he was dying for yours. So I hope that it's clear to understand that the cross was planned so that your salvation would not be left up to chance. Thank you so much for watching. If you're curious to learn more about the cross, I have a video here where I make several recommendations on books that you could read to learn more about what actually happened at the cross of Jesus Christ. Thanks again. Stay blessed. Stay bookmarked.